Kia ora e hoa mā, welcome to the Whangārei Matters podcast. In a special episode for Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, Emma sits down with Aaron Taikato, General Manager of Strategy and Democracy. Aaron shares his personal journey with Te Reo, including his hopes and dreams for his tamariki and mokopuna, and explains how revitalising Te Reo is about much more than just a language. Ka pai, ka rawe.
Kia ora, Aaron. Welcome to the Whangārei Matters podcast. We're here today to talk about Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori and particularly the value of the Te Reo Māori language. So we're hoping that you can speak to us about this and share your experiences with Te Reo Māori.
Oh, kia ora Emma. Kia ora kaita, whakarongo mai rā. Ko Aaron Taikato tōku ingoa, he kaimahi au mō te kaunihira Whangarei te ringa paraua. Hoa noho ana kei ke konei ki ro te Whangarei heuri tēne o te aroa o ngā te wina kōpaka o ngā te hauora. Nā reira, ko tēnei te mihi atu kia poitai.
Kia ora. So I guess the first and most obvious question for this podcast is, what is Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori?
Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori is probably a lot of different things for a lot of different people, but what we try and do in New Zealand essentially is promote a week where we consciously have an effort around our reo, around our pronunciation, what does the reo mean in terms of that fabric that binds our country. And essentially it comes back to, I think it was about mid-1970s, 1975, where we had the start of Te Wiki Reo Māori. That, I suppose, has evolved over time. We then moved into, I think it was Dame Nada Glavich, who was then a young Nada Glavich, who said kia ora, working on, and it caused a national uproar, her greeting those working for the national poll, telephone directory people. I think what came out of that was probably the Māori Language Act a few years later. If my memory serves me correctly, it was in the 80s. Really, that renaissance started in 82, went through for a few years, and it was about 85, I think, that 87 that the Māori Language Act came into effect. So that gave some formal identity to the reo, and it has evolved over time to where we are today, where everybody's pretty aware of the Māori Language Week. There's usually a theme for that week each year. My understanding is Moake Tonu Ake, or Forever and Ever, is our theme this year. Arohatia Te Reo, well, there has been another theme. So really it provides a theme, it provides an opportunity for people to promote the reo. It's authentic to New Zealand only. And of course, with a language, you can't just learn a language without learning the culture. And so when we have initiatives such as this, we're putting some conscious effort into strengthening the biocultural relationship within the country. When I say bicultural, I suppose that within there, it's multicultural as well, because if we revert back to the treaty, it talks about Māori, the Queen, and her representatives, or her subjects. So it's Māori and everyone else, and we can provide an opportunity in our busy lives to stop and start providing some attention to not just the language, but what that actually means socially around understanding, gaining an understanding for one another. So it's a great positive initiative.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a big and complex piece to speak to from a national perspective, and if you're looking at the history involved. If we were to bring that back down to a personal point of view, what does Te Reo Māori mean to you and your family?
Well, I hark back to the saying of one of our tupuna, well known in the Māori world and beyond actually, and that would have been Tahimi Hinare. And he talks about ko te reo Māori, te Māori o te mana Māori, which essentially says the language is the essence of what it is to be Māori. And it's so true. Without the language, we can be proud to be Māori, we can be proud to come from New Zealand and acknowledge that we have Māori, that Māori are the indigenous people of Aotearoa, New Zealand, but there is another in-depth learning of the culture that accompanies your journey when learning the te reo Māori. It's something that means it's very important. It's very important to me personally. I think it's something that if we had more understanding generally around our general public of the reo, if it was used as an intrinsic part of being a Kiwi, I think that we'd have the race relations within our country would be a lot smoother, because I do feel that a lot of the pushback in Māori kaupapa usually comes from an element of fear and not engaging with what the kaupapa may be, a lack of understanding around it, and through understanding, through involvement, through weeks such as Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, we can promote these things.
Thank you, yeah. And speaking to your personal involvement with Te Reo Māori, what did you notice from your grandparents' time through to your parents' time, through to your own time, and then on to your children's time, how your interactions with the Māori language have changed through the generations?
Yeah, it absolutely has. We had the kind of early colonial times where everyone spoke Te Reo Māori. If you look at the pre-1900 correspondence from central government to the Crown to Māori was written in Māori. The rate in which people learnt, which Māori learnt how to write, also we were seeing an interest of newcomers or tauiwi, foreigners coming to New Zealand and adopting the language and using the language. Over various legislations that has been oppressed over time, and until probably around the 70s when we have this massive renaissance of the reo. So essentially, if I look at my grandparents, who were probably in that era where it was promoted both inside and outside Māori communities that you're a good community servant in what is essentially a kind of a white world. So a Westminster kind of Victorian Eurocentric world that was being pushed on to Māori at the time. And Māori certainly subscribed to it through that oppression, believing probably that they were inferior, speaking the reo at home but not speaking it anywhere else or in public or anything like that. Essentially it was shunned upon. And then you have the generation of my parents who were raised under that type of Victorian manner, were also belted for speaking the reo. I remember speaking to my father. He passed away about 8 or 9 years ago now though, but him saying to me, he grew up a very confused boy. So he had a teacher that would smack him for speaking Māori, and he had a grandmother that would smack him for speaking English. So he didn't know what to speak when. And I think that as time went by and he left school and he started to work as an apprentice, moved in with the great urban push in the 1950s into town, you're more ostracised from that cultural base that you have of your tūranga waiwai, your standing place, and you start to follow these new European, Eurocentric ways. So I think that he probably neglected his taha Māori, his reo, for a long time. Whilst he was a native speaker, I never really heard him speak the reo until his 50th birthday.
Wow.
And that's when I realised, whārai, he does actually speak the reo. And yet I tried to initiate learning it at school, and you're trying to initiate a conversation with him, and he'd look to you in a scornful way and say to you, there's only one way to learn the reo, and that's at the marae, not in a classroom. So he had these fixed mindsets. Of course, over time, I think that subsided, and he started to realise that he was merely in that stream of colonisation, and he'd absolutely subscribed to that And in his later years, he spoke a lot more reo. I only spoke to him in probably his last 10 years was in the reo. He loved the fact that my children were brought up with the reo, and started to see this growth of brown pride starting to surge up from the weeds. So that was quite a beautiful thing for me to kind of reminisce on and think back around the journey that he took in comparison to the journey that my grandparents took, to the journey that he took. And now you have a young boy, myself and my generation growing up, you're visiting marae, you're hearing the reo spoken, you're being told often the reo, and you kind of put things together, but you're not always 100% sure on what it is that you're being told. And then as I took it up at school, and it wasn't until secondary school that I took te reo, and then for me that was confirmation. Oh wow, that what I thought it meant, that is what it meant, So there's a lot of confirmation in that in those first couple of years, and just doing part-time reo. Did exactly the same though, essentially what my father did, and chased a career. So I joined the military. The military, very, very Eurocentric, very Victorian traditions. And so there wasn't too much space for that cultural component within the Defence Force. That changed in about 1997 as we had a new general that had a vision. But I do, in hindsight, I do look back on those times too, and whilst the intent was right, I think how it was executed could have been done a lot better. I've essentially had to go off and do night classes and learn the reo and be more involved with Māori kaupapa, and then also moving north here to living amongst my wife's people, where fluency is still quite common in the small little valley of Mototau that we live in. So if we have a church service at the marae, if we have anything at the marae, all things are done in the reo. Most of our community events are done in the reo, so really fortunate. And so then we step on again into the next generation of my tamariki, and so they know no different. So they don't realise the struggle that their ancestors, even their parents, having to learn the reo. The journey that is, it's a real long journey, and it's a journey of self-discovery as well. And you realise there's times that you check yourself and you realise, far out, I used to think like this, and now I can see that was such a colonised way of thinking. So we certainly look at things differently today, and how we used to look at things. It's a lot more holistic. It's not just trying to get an outcome or an output. There's a lot more things that we need to take into consideration, how they may be affected. So that's what the language has done for us. And I speak to my children and I say to them, you don't know how fortunate you are. You've been blessed, raised in the reo, where you think it's just a normal thing. Yet there's a lot of battles that have gone on for you to be raised this way. So I still think that they take it for advantage. I am hopeful, though, that as they spread their wings and they kind of see the rest of the world, that they realise just what a privilege they have to have been raised around native speakers, being their grandparents, their elders, in a very Māori environment, which is still places them well with their identity of who they are, and they can go out to the rest of the world and be quite confident knowing that home will never go anywhere.
And have you noticed that your growing connection with the te reo Māori has enhanced your connection with the land or the places around you, or the stories that you heard growing up? Like, as you got deeper into the language, have those connections changed as well?
Yeah, absolutely it has. What's in a name? There's so many things in a name, and I think of even names on maps that you see, and I think of one just on my in-laws' farm. It's called Wahapako. Wahapako. Waha is the mouth, and pako is that sound. So when it comes from the mouth, it's that salivating sound. So wahapako. And it tells a beautiful story, essentially. It's the genesis of how a lot of the names down the valley were named from one incident. And of course that keeps the stories alive on who pursued who were these bad people that were being, this incident, who were all involved, and the details of that, and which lines they are today, so you're able to follow those things, following whakapapa, which is so important because it provides you such a blood connection to the land, essentially. And so wahapako means, quite a treasure, I suppose, within the family and within the hapu o Ngāti Te Taro of Ngāti Hine. You see that there on the maps, and it's ko whakapako or something like that. It's real bastardised name of what it actually is. And I'd say that would have been through the surveyor at the time, probably having zero reo and trying to work out, what's the name of this, and they would have said, ko wahapako. And then, of course, with the dialectual difference with the WH, we know generically in Māoridom, whereas here in the north, it's more of a wha. So whaka becomes whaka. And you put ko in front of a name when you speak te reo, if you're starting with that. So if a survey had said to you, what's the name of this place? And they'd respond, ko wahapako. They said, okay, these guys dropped the H and they say it more like a W, and he's put a ko at the start. So, they've put a lot of their imagination in and has essentially really bastardised the language doing it. And that's formalised now. That sits in maps. And of course, there's a process that needs to be taken to rectify that, whether it's through a treaty process or whether it's through another mechanism like we know we've done with Te Kamo. It used to be called Kamo. Te Kamo was one of their rangatira of Ngā Te Kahua Torangare, and it's fitting that we use the correct name for that. So, I'm sure that there'll be people that live in Kamo or Te Kamo that continue to call it Kamo today because that's what they've known. But it is about paying respect, I suppose, to the genesis of that name, understanding actually where it came from, who this Te Kamo guy actually was, and how influential he was over that area at the time, where he resided, why they named it after him. So, these are really important stories, and then it kind of brings me back to the importance of that mutual understanding of where these names come from, where the language, how it has evolved into meaning this and the like. So our reo is a great tool for our social fabric of Aotearoa.
When you think of your future generations, what are your aspirations or your hopes for your mokopuna with te reo Māori?
I think about this all the time, actually, and even with our children. So it takes 3 generations to embed the reo back into a family. And so I know within my family that we've had a break in the line, and it was essentially my generation. So we've had to go off and relearn the reo, and our children have been fortunate to be raised in the reo. So through hell or high water, I will ensure that my children raise their children amongst the reo to embed that back into my line. And again, it's so important because we are able to then think more we have more of an open mind. The more languages and the more understanding you know the cultures, just the better person you are, I believe. And for Māori, I think to be able to connect a hinengaro, a tinana, a wairua are really important, and it's really difficult to do that if you don't have the reo. To connect spiritually to our Māori belief system, to find a place for it in today's world that sits comfortably with you, to have a mind that is strong and resilient and is really powerful and that those future generations can move in both worlds and any world with confidence because they know where they're bedded. And then I think just that the physical aspect of being able to connect with your marae, connect with your tūranga waiwai or your whenua that's set in your ancestral lands, that sat in your family for generations, They being able to climb your mountain, drink from your waters, use the same practices of whether it's kohinga rongoa, collecting of medicines, or kai from the bush, the knowledge, the stories that are handed down from that. They're really important things, and it's kind of hard to explain for me why they're so important. It's just a feeling that you have, and it's essentially, as you move into adulthood, turns into a self-felt obligation that you have a duty of care to raise these children in this type of manner. And so I'm hoping that there's real positive things for our following generations, for my mokopuna, that they know who they are, they know who their tūpuna were, they know the stories, and they're connected.
Within your role here at Council, what are some of the ways that we can further the revitalisation of te reo Māori?
Yeah, so we've done a few things already, and we continue to grow in this space in the council. We've essentially adopted a reo rua strategy for Whangārei, so that's identifying areas, and that was essentially, initially we were engaged by Department of Internal Affairs. Are you interested in claiming a bilingual city for Whangārei? We were interested in doing that. We sat down with the hapu and got their feedback, and then that became an exercise where the hapu were the main drafters of the strategy, resourced by the DIA, presented through to council, of which we had some of our Māori outcome staff work with them as well, and adopted by council. So that in itself has been a great exercise. We look again the Te Kamo example, and actually bringing a story to the word or to the name, I think is really important, and providing some understanding around that. Our Māori outcomes even within itself, and what we're trying to develop here in the organisation around a cultural capability framework, where we can build the confidence of staff not just around the reo, but I think more importantly around the knowledge and the histories of our hapu that sit here. The language will give you one thing, and in its initial stages with an organisation like the council, it could even be described as kind of surface skills, tools that you require. Do you require the language to be able to engage? No, you don't. You need to have an understanding, but the language will certainly embellish the relationship that you're hoping to make with tangata whenua, whether it be hapu, whānau or iwi, or mātāwaka for that fact too. So when I talk about mātāwaka, that's essentially those, such as myself, that don't whakapapa into the local hapu of Whangarei, but certainly identify themselves as Māori. Yeah.
That word mātāwaka, is that waka canoe?
Yes.
And the mata is what, a guest or a
No, it's more of it's the multitudes of waka, I suppose, how I would explain mata waka.
So even that components of the language that help explain that concept.
Yes,
it's fascinating.
There's more than one. Yeah.
So you mentioned Whangārei reo rua. Are there specific actions in the strategy that that we can expect to see in the near future, or what will the public notice coming out of council?
I think we'll start seeing a bit more dual signage around the place to start off with. We are looking to establish real areas, what we call wahi rumaki, which is wahi may be the place, and rumaki is total immersion. So we can introduce areas, and it might be a playground. During certain hours of the day, we encourage the Māori language to be spoken. So there's lots of different little initiatives like that are really cool. Everything's optional. Nothing's rammed down your throat. You will not be caned if you are caught speaking Māori at the playground. You know, those types of things are really important, and I think it's important that we promote our reo in a positive way, not in an enforcement way at all, because we know that when you try to force something, you get exactly the opposite result that you're looking to try and achieve. So, yeah, I'm really excited about reo for Whangarei, and it's a great positive move for the future generations of this district. Yeah.
No, awesome. Now, I know that there are so many resources out there for people wanting to learn te reo or understand te reo a little better. Do you have any particular favourites that you could point us towards?
Well, there are a cacophony of providers around, and and that's fantastic to see in itself. There's some really good programs. I think just in generic stuff, I think what's important is that when you start off to learn the reo, is that you just probably try and learn any reo. You'll hear people talk about, but you have to learn the mita of your tribe, your tribal mita, or your community mita being dialect. You can pick up a dialect in 6 months. If you have the base reo, you'll pick up the dialect in about 6 months. Whereas if you don't have the base reo, you're starting from scratch, and you can probably look at about 3 years doing part-time before you can have a basic conversation. So it is a really long journey. But in terms of resources, I think that Te Wānanga o Raukawa, Te Wānanga o Te Roa, they both have good courses. The online one for Raukawa is a great online option to start off learning the reo. Also, the Te Ara Reo programs that Te Wānanga o Te Roa run are designed for working students. So essentially, when you're working and all their classes are run at night, and they go up to about level 4 or 5, I think, which will get you to a good basic intermediate entry into intermediate level of conversation. So they're really worth doing those types of courses. Then once you've got the base, I'm a firm believer that once you have a baseline, try and find a raumaki, try and find a total immersion course where you're forced to speak. You're put in that environment of dissonance where you just you're uncomfortable, but you have to do it. You need to swallow a bit of pride and stuff things up. And it's actually been great having the children at home, because as they've matured, their reo outgrows yours, because they're amongst it 24/7. And so, you get the odd chuckle in the way that you may put a sentence and they'll chuckle at you and that. But it's all part of it. Learning any language, you've got to swallow the ego, you've got to swallow the pride and just give it a go. So, yeah, they would be kind of the online, in-person courses that I would suggest. Once you've got the fundamental reo, look for something that's in your area. Social media, you usually see what's happening around the place if you've got an interest in that space. There's some great reading to be done to help to embellish that learning journey. I'm a great fan of Scotty Morrison's Te Reo Māori Made Easy. He has phrases, has reo at work, just some really good practical tools there that you can absorb as much information, and helps your journey of learning the reo.
Yeah, I've heard about Scotty Morrison just recently, in fact, and I did have a look in the Central Library here in Whangarei, and they do have a huge selection of his work, so that's a nice, easy thing for people to go and have a look at.
Absolutely. Great. And I think the great thing about Scotty is that he didn't start learning te reo Māori. He's been one of the, what we'd call a matanga te reo, or matatau te reo. So he's an expert in the reo Māori, considered to be. Yet he's a second language learner. And so he didn't actually start learning till he left school. And so that tells you that he has had to analyse the reo. We have some beautiful native speakers. You ask them, why do you put ki instead of e, or whatever it may be, and they'll come back, well, that's the way that my mother spoke, but so they haven't really had to analyse it as much as what a second language learner, they learn the theory of why they say stuff as well, rather than just saying it and just knowing that it's correct. And you'll see native speakers break rules at times as well.
Same
and
as
that's
English.
Yeah, that's right. Same as English. So there's no set black and white correct way. Well, there is within reason though. There's always exceptions to the rule. Yeah.
No, awesome. And just before we wrap up, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone like me who wants to do better and could use a bit of help?
Wow, that's a great question, Emma. It's really about perseverance. When you're rowing that waka of learning, sometimes you're out of beat, sometimes you have just had enough and you need a rest. I've known people, and I've even done it myself, jumped off the waka just to have a proper rest and then jump back on a year later. Just take a bit of a sabbatical. So manage your own expectations. It is a long journey, but it's certainly a journey worth taking. And, you know, there's a kōrero that our tūpuna talk about, and it says, whaia te i te kahurangi, ki te tūohu koe, me he maunga teitei. So it talks about, you know, strive for the pinnacles of life. If you have to bow down, let it be to a lofty mountain. And I think that is a good message around perseverance, sticking to it. Yes, there'll be times, but that you'll have to kind of jump off the waka, but make sure that you haven't lost track of what you're having to do, and that the reason that you're jumping off is a valid reason to do so. Just like anything, if you start it, try and finish it. And just know that it's step by step. Manage your own expectations, I think, is probably the hardest thing. I always remember asking a lot of people, but how long will it be till I'm actually able to speak te reo fluently? And, you know, you get a whole raft of, there's so many variables in that question. And you get a whole raft of answers, but that's what I would say. Perseverance is key. Stick to it, stay positive, and know that you're learning and gaining some fantastic skills and treasures that can be passed on to future generations.
No, kia ora, thank you very much. I think those are all the questions I had for you. And I guess one of the key things that I will take away from this is be prepared to put yourself out there and accept some embarrassment. You're going to get it wrong. Just keep trying.
Yeah, that's right.
Nice.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank
Kia
you very
ora.
much, Aaron.